Meech, how the are we gonna do that, huh? By going directly at the and tear our family apart.
Brian.
One of the things we've learned about Meech and Terry is they know the consequences of this game. They know the hurt, pain, and suffering it's caused their family, as well as death of those close to them. And Ty Washington, as well as Monique, was yet another example of what happens in this game. As a collective, they left behind a wife and 3 kids. Yet the Flannerys keep on pushing the boundaries when it comes to this game, regardless of what they see happening around them. In episode 9, we saw them on a trip to ATL with the PA boys, which is mainly business focused, but it's when they sway away from business when things start to take a turn for the worst. But the main reason for Meech and Terry going out to ATL is to set up a base in the city, as they previously did in Cleveland, where they were moving product and making money. So from their previous connections of Goldie and Ty, they start to make things happen. Now Meech and Terry are also divided on what to do with B. Mickey, after it was revealed he was working for Detective Brian, and should they have pulled the trigger on the rooftop. Back in Detroit, someone really does need to stop Lamar because now he's gone and killed Monique, which leaves Zoe without a mother, and Charles and Lucille's marriage is pretty much at breaking point. With Detective Brian and Jin, they seem like they're closing in on Meech and Terry. So let's get into all things BMF Season 2, Episode 9. Now, Episode 7's title was Both Sides of the Fence, and this is where Meech and Terry still find themselves. They may be on the same page when it comes to setting up a shop in ATL, but when it comes to B. Mickey, Terry wants them to dead B, whereas Meech, he doesn't kill family. But Meech will be wise to remember some game that K9 was spitting earlier in the season. It's not blood that makes you family, it's loyalty, and that's one thing about the game. Regardless of the perspective you have, the rules remain the same. You can't bend them, and a snitch is a snitch. And this is what Terry tries to remind Meech. What happens the next time Brian brings Meech in? What happens when he gives Meech a choice of his life or Meech and Terry's? And that's why they need to take him to ATL and leave him there for good. Now on the other side of this phone was Detective Brian, who still holds a murder weapon for J-Mo and Kato from when B. Mickey killed them in Season 1. And he knew it was B at his home, and they both know Detective Brian would never give up.
Giving aid to one's enemies is treason, the highest crime in the nation, and in the drug game punishable by death. It's damn near the only thing D-boys and the American government agree on.
The older Terry also said when people hear Freaknik, they think of honeys, horny dudes, and hip-hop. But it wasn't always like that. Freaknik started off as a picnic for students at the AU Center who couldn't go home for spring breaks. Up until then, we only knew spring breaks as the gaze of the white America. But this completely changed everything. But that's also when the real problems began. One of the PA boys forcing himself on women resulted in him being kicked out of the PA crew. But Remy, who got in the middle, he's someone who caused more problems for Meech later on. Now, Meech's reason for kicking Shane out was because as soon as he's caught up for being aggressive with women, he'd start snitching to save his own ass. And it was interesting that the camera panned to B. Mickey, the situation that Terry spoke of at the beginning of the episode, and one which may eventually come back to bite them. Now, Meech, Terry, and B. Mickey went to go visit Goldie and asked her if they could clean money in one of her clubs. And even though at first she hesitated, she couldn't resist Meech's smile, and you could tell Goldie definitely likes the Flannerys, although she's not too keen on B. Now, what made them bounce from Goldie's place was when Meech got spooked by Goldie's sister Sandra, who we later found out was suffering from AIDS, which epitomizes the era and problems that generation had to deal with. By 1994, AIDS became a leading cause of death for all Americans between the ages of 25 and 44. But nobody was going to stop Goldie from taking care of her sister, and she definitely made it known she takes care of hers. Now, this trip to ATL was one which was mainly business focused, and so their next stop was to Ty Washington to get approval to step into some territory. But the other half of this trip was all fun and games at Magic City, and they wanted Ty to enjoy the night with them. But a heavy focus was on how he was a family man and why it was always a bad idea. Another bit of game K9 gave to Meech earlier in the season was how he didn't drink or go to clubs. And around the shootout which followed ended in Ty's death tells you why K9 was all about business. Now, unfortunately for Meech, he had to give his partner the unfortunate news of his death, but that was only half the problems. Earlier in the episode, we saw Terry paying an exterminator to take out a rap problem, B. Mickey. So in this shootout, we not only saw the hitter that Terry hired, but also Remy, who Meech was face to face with earlier. Now, he wasn't happy that they were setting up shop in ATL, and a fierce shootout led to Ty's death, as well as a showdown between Terry and B. Mickey, where B held a gun to Terry, but holding a gun to his head was Meech. Now, this is where Meech and Terry found themselves both sides of the fence. Terry wanted him to pull the trigger, but after Meech lost one brother that night, he wasn't down to lose another. Instead, they were going to go after the guy who was going after their family, Detective Brian. Now, albeit B. Mickey may have been a problem and may still be, Terry's caused another, his relationship with Markeisha and Boom being arrested, and he knows the operation is in trouble over him wanting to pursue this relationship with Markeisha, which by the way, Meech definitely warned him of. Now, back in Detroit, the fact that the BMF and PA boys were back in business, this was heard to Lamar. When they were run out of the city earlier in the season, this allowed Lamar to terrorize the streets and hit everybody for taxes, and he bears the chains of everybody he's taxed or killed around his neck, but he can't offload any bricks or do any business. Now, when he broke Alvin's TV later in the episode, he didn't present him with a new one, he gave him yet another dead body, this time it was Monique's. Meech was never a big fan of Monique using her charm and being Lamar's weakness as a way to kill him, because it was way too risky, and he was right. Previously, Monique hesitated when it came to pulling the trigger on Lamar, so this time she thought she'd kill him with some drugs, but Lamar was 3 steps ahead of Monique. He told her to hit it first, and when she hesitated, he started choking her, and he knew it was a setup all along, and that's what made him flip a switch. One thing you'll notice about Lamar is, if you're on his good side and you do as he says, then you're good. But the moment you call him crazy, disrespect Blackie, or anything else, then all hell will break loose. Now, what made this scene that much more impactful was that he picked up the phone to Zoe, and Alvin warned him, do not answer the phone. But nobody tells Lamar what to do. Now, Zoe wasn't interested in speaking to Lamar. She wanted to speak to her mom's Monique, a death that will no doubt fuel Meech to get rid of Lamar once and for all. Now, while the PA boys and the BMF were in ATL, and Lamar dealing with the aftermath of Monique's death, Detective Brian and Jin are still at hard work to try and get evidence against Meech and Terry. One thing I do have to say is, them being in a romantic relationship may not be the wisest move, as we see Jin doing her own investigation while Brian was sleeping. And that's because there's a lack of trust. Earlier we saw Kevin coming to the station and opening up about how he was stuffed in a closet during their home raid, where he thought it was his school bully. But we all know Detective Brian knows it was B. Mickey. So secrets do cast dark clouds over this relationship, and at some point, Detective Jin may have to make a decision. But in terms of their investigation, we learned that Boom's fingerprints were found at a scene of a crime, and that was a shock to Brian. Apparently Boom is supposed to be one of the smart ones, but they were definitely going to use this to their advantage. Earlier in episode 8, we saw them trying to work wonder with the pictures they had of Markeisha and Terry, but she was someone who remained solid for the father of her child, despite knowing he was cheating on her. Boom, on the other hand, oh, he definitely sang like a bird. He told Brian that the Flannery stole K9's Colombian Connect, and now their next course of action will be to talk to some witnesses and potentially get K9 to give up the Flannerys and the cartel. So the older Terry's narration pretty much summed up the situation Meech and Terry found themselves in at the top of the rooftop. They were so busy fighting each other, they lost sight of the enemies who they were closing in on, so they'd better hope that K9 don't sing like Boom. Now, Lucille and Charles' relationship really has been in a difficult place since season 1, but things took a turn in episode 8 when Lucille found the Easy Motel receipt in Charles' pocket, and it was like adding insult to injury. Lucille was working at Wendy's earning pennies, while Charles is spending it on motels, having an affair. But it does make you ask the question, even though they received the money from Terry's settlement, you would have thought that they would have kept some money away for a rainy day, but putting everything into a business venture with a son who they knew was influenced by their older brother, who they also knew was in the drug game, but turned a blind eye to it when it came to Terry, wasn't the smartest decision. But when the affair came to light in episode 8, we saw Lucille heading out to dinner with Pastor Swift, and Charles couldn't say a word. Previously we've seen him voice his opinions when it comes to Pastor Swift, but this time, he had no leg to stand on. Now, even though this was just a dinner with Lucille to somewhat heal and find a sense of direction, Pastor Swift had other ideas, and when he didn't get his way, the bill was split 50-50. Now, an encounter with Maybelle and Lucille pouring her heart out to Maybelle led her to finding out some more evidence and piecing the puzzle together that the woman who Charles was having an affair with was sitting right in front of her. Now, this is when you realize Charles had no shame at all. This was sent to me on Instagram after episode 9, and it just shows you how close Lucille's place of work is to Easy Motel. But Lucille was done playing games, and in a way, it really was good to see a Lucille stand up for herself and break in Charles' guitar in the process. Now, whether they can make this marriage work after broken promises from Charles is yet to be seen, but it definitely will be difficult. But that's a breakdown of BMF Season 2, Episode 9, one where Meech suffered 2 losses, one in Ty Washington in ATL, and another back home in Detroit that will only pour more petrol onto the fire between him and Lamar. So something definitely has to give when it comes to Meech and Lamar, especially when he finds out about Monique's death. And I think we can all be certain that this is a storyline that needs to end in one way. Lamar needs to go. But drop all your thoughts down below on all things BMF Season 2, Episode 9. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.